My name is Matthew Wright. I'm Judge Wright, and I live in Rosebud, Texas. And I graduated from Baylor University, so I know how to sick 'em. I graduated from Texas Wesleyan Law, which became A&M Law, and I work for A&M Law too, and I work for Baylor as well, so I can sick 'em and gig 'em. So I refer to myself as a baggie. I go to St. Anne's Parish in Rosebud, Texas, and I have a law firm there in Rosebud. We primarily serve underserved communities, specifically rural, because there's really not a large group of lawyers in the area, so we serve that population, and we practice in Milam County, Bosque County, Bell County, McLennan County, Falls County, Bosque, Collin, Erath, Dallas, and Tarrant, and so we're kind of all over the state, so that's what we do. And only a couple other little background parts of me is I did attend for part of my law school. Went over to Hebrew University and studied law in Israel, and I'm a credentialed mediator with the state, and I preside over two courts here in Falls County. One is a court of record, and one is a municipal court. As a court of record, I handle felony arrest warrants, the blood warrants for drinking and driving alcohol, and of course standard arrest and standard search warrants as well for felony level crimes.
All right. What made you decide to pursue a career in law?
Well, I actually was out in the workplace for almost a decade after I graduated from Baylor. And I got so frustrated with lawyers saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, that I said, well, if you can't beat them, join them and figure out ways for people to do something. I think it's important that we do something. You know, we do with what we can, where we are with what we have, and we figure out ways to get things done. And so I got frustrated with it, and I got called to jury duty. And I was sitting on the jury, and I was sitting there thinking, I can do this better than them. And I'm tired of being told no. And so I went back into the law and did that. And then after I got out of law school and did that, I was appointed as a judge. And I think probably a next question, I don't know if this is part of your question or not, but I'll answer is, why do I want to be, district judge? I've always felt a calling to public service, and I think this is the next step. I think this is the next way, and I think God gives you the right opportunities, the right experiences, and puts you in the right place at the right time. And I really think that this is the right time and the right place, and I feel that I'm being led to do this as the next version of public service. And I have on one of my videos the question, and I tell the story about the kid that I worked with, that after punishing him but still working with him, he turned around and made an impact, and he's doing well. And I cite that as kind of the motivation because that's what really inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing.
How many years of experience do you have in law?
Sure. In law, I've been a lawyer for 9 years. I've been a mediator for 9 years, and I've been a judge for 5 years. I'm licensed in Texas. I'm licensed in Missouri, and I'm licensed with the U.S. Supreme Court. And I've been licensed with the U.S. Supreme Court since, I want to say, was it 2015? I think 2015. And so that's unique. Not every lawyer gets to do that because there's a nomination, there's an evaluation process, and you have to present your credentials and your experience, and you actually have to be accepted by the court after that process is finished. And so that's my years. Before that, I was an executive with nonprofits. And worked in nonprofits and did a lot of grant writing. In fact, I think my career totals $150 million of grants for different community projects, domestic violence, children's hospital substance abuse, mental health program, veterans mental health program, stuff like that, all the stuff that I've raised money for and done things for. So I went to law school late in life, and I think that actually gives me a better perspective, because I've had to work for a boss. I know what it means to work for a boss. I also know what it means to be a boss, and that's very different. And the other thing too is that most lawyers never get to serve on juries, and so I've actually never been a defendant, but I've always been as part of the process. I've been a civilian in the process, which gives me a very, very unique experience to see it from a different perspective than most lawyers are able to see it.
Now, one of the things that your opponent points out is that he has 35 years of experience versus your 9 years
Sure.
of experience. How do you match up to that?
Well, I'm not going to take anything away from his experience. I mean, he's a good litigator, and he'll probably remain a good litigator. I'm not concerned about his experience level in terms of litigation. The difference is, and where we differ from, and I don't spend a lot of time talking about my opponent. Most of the time, I think I've got a vision and I've got credentials that go to it, is that my credentials are of such that by the time I take the oath of office, I'll have about 150 hours of judicial training by the state of Texas. That state of Texas mandated. I'm a judge by the state. I've done 12 jury trials as a judge, and I'm the only candidate that can say that. It's a different attitude. It's a different temperament. I mean, you and I were both at a game the other night, and you know, when we're at the game, we can sit there and we can scream and we can applaud for Marlon, and we can be jumping up and down in the stands, and you know, the coach can be firing stuff. You expect that from litigation and the parties. But a judge has to have a temperament that doesn't matter what's going on with the game, doesn't matter what the pump-up music's going, doesn't matter what the crowd's doing, doesn't matter any of that stuff. They got to stay cool, level-headed, and they look at the trial very differently. And, you know, we assume, because of movies and stuff, we assume that that's all the judge does is trials. In the 82nd, it's less than 2% go to trial. So what is the rest of the 98% of the time the judge does? And it's process. And I'm the only candidate that's had to reform 2 courts to ensure that the process is proper for, you know, under the U.S. Constitution and the Texas Constitution. That's the biggest difference, is that that's great. I've had district court trial experience too. I've had county court trial experience. I've had federal court trial experience. I've argued in front of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. All of that stuff is good, but there is nothing more different than being a judge. And I can say that because I've been a lawyer and I've been a judge, and it is just a completely different mindset, and you don't know it until you get there.
What made you want to become a judge?
So what really makes me become a judge is the impact and the solutions. A lot of times as a lawyer, we can't get to the resolution. You know, we can try to move the process to the resolution, and we can make our case to the resolution, but what I found was the most exciting was, as a judge, I was able to take a defendant and say, what's the issue? Why do you keep coming into court? And yes, assign a punishment. You know, society demands that there be some type of punishment, but then also sit there and say, what's the underlying reason for this? And are you just making bad decisions? Do you have an addiction of some sort? Is it because you're stuck in the cycle of poverty? You know, what is it there? And then can the court, because the court can, the great thing about state courts, all levels, is that we have a lot of options that federal courts don't. And we have options of bringing in community resources and getting the assistance to people that they really need. Because at the end of the day, you don't want people in jail as the public. I don't want people in jail as the public, because you and I are paying for it. What I'd prefer to have is I'd prefer to have someone that pays their penalty and then is able to continue their life. And sometimes that includes jail. Sometimes that's the only thing that's appropriate. But sometimes it includes other services and other things that need to be provided to the public. And as a judge, more so than an attorney, you can craft that solution. And I think that's what keeps me motivated to want to do it, is to craft that solution and get people moving on.
What are some of the qualifications or skills you possess that make you the better choice?
Well, I'm the only one with judicial experience. I'm the only one that's done anything as a judge trying it. I'm the only one that has a state training as a judge. I'm also the only candidate that is licensed before the U.S. Supreme Court, can argue before the Supreme Court. I'm also the only candidate that's a Texas credentialed mediator. And what does that mean? That means that I have demonstrated over the course of my profession almost 125, 140 cases, civil cases, that we can come to a resolution where I'm the third party. And that is what a judge is. A judge is a neutral third party. And so you have my experience as a judge, you have my experience as a mediator, you also have my experience as an attorney, but then you also have my experience as just regular Joe that's worked for his life. Those are all unique. Those are the things that differentiate me from anyone else in this race. Those are the things that belong to me, and I've earned that, and I've worked for that stuff. The other items are the other parts of the checklist to make sure I meet all the standard qualifications. But I've also handled CPS cases, criminal cases, civil cases, family law cases, tax and property cases in the district court levels. And one of my experiences that I think is good is that I've practiced in so many different district courts across the state that I've seen what's good, what doesn't work. I'm not going to say bad, but what doesn't work. And I can now bring that to the 82nd. And, we all get this way. We all sit there and say, okay, well, how we do it in Marlin's the right way. How we do it in Rosebud's the right way. How we do it in Franklin's the right way. But, when you get out there and you see the other stuff, there's people out there that have some smarts and know what they're doing. And you know what? I've typically found they're willing to share. And so, let's bring all that stuff forward. So I think the things that differentiate me is the fact that I am a judge and I do have some qualifications that make me more fitted for it, but then also my broad-based experience. I will say that Texas A&M recognized this last year. I was awarded the Public Interest Fellowship because of the work I've done in reforming rural-based courts. Texas A&M gave me the first Public Interest Fellowship last year. And that was a great honor, and I think that just recognizes those credentials.
What will be your top priority for the counties you preside over?
Equal access and transparency, I think, is going to be, all courts right now are struggling with this idea of how to manage technology and the law degree from Google, all right? Because everyone now has a law degree from Google. And all the courts are struggling with this. My background dealing with technology, mental health, veterans health issues, and then having to reform 2 courts gives me a unique experience to sit there and say, we're going to have to figure this out because every court's struggling with it. How do you deal with this influx of people that are representing themselves? How do you ensure that people have access when sometimes there's an access gap? I mean, there is a gap in terms of technology and also the ability of people to afford representation. And sometimes when someone can't afford representation, they go to the technology and they go to Google Law. And all of a sudden, now they're doing something that they really need to have good representation and a counselor on. So one of the things that I'm interested in doing is trying to marry the technology to ensure that people just don't get rolled over by the system. The system is extremely large. It's very complicated. And we have to make sure as a court that we're open and accessible and that we make sure that people aren't just rolled over by process, not because anyone's out to get them, just pure process. And so we need to make sure that people get timely notice, people have access to the court, and then people also know what's going on in the court. We have an obligation to communicate to the populace, what is your court doing? How many drug cases are we doing? How many sexual assault cases are we doing? And the thing is, all this information's there, it's all public, but the courts are not doing a good job communicating out. And I think that one of the things we need to do is communicate what the courts are doing out. And then also offer opportunities like bring in National Adoption Day, take some of the best practices for mental health and veterans, and then also start looking at how we deal with people that have served their sentence and need to get employed. Is there something the court can do to ensure that people are able to, after they've served their time or their punishment or done what they need to do, is there something the court can do to ensure that people are able to get meaningful employment? And there are some best practices around the state that we can look at to do that.
What are some of your core beliefs from a personal, professional, and judicial standpoint?
Judicial first is easy, is that I'm the umpire and I'm not taking sides. And that the Constitution, the legislative body makes the rule, the executive needs to execute it, and the judiciary needs to interpret and then sentence on the criminal side. I'm really firm in that the rule of law and the Constitution have to be the guiding force into it. And that I have to be fair, is that yes, I'm going to treat you with respect. When you come in, I'm going to say good morning to you. I'm going to call you Mr. or Mrs., but we're going to have to deal with the business at hand regardless of who you are. I think from the judicial perspective, that's core for me, and no shenanigans. I have a no shenanigan, that now links me to my professional. I have a no shenanigan policy with stuff. I don't have time for it. The stuff I've seen in my personal life, we have a lot of serious problems, and we have to address them as a society. And shenanigans just get in the way. And so I'm not interested in that. From a professional side, One thing that I think everyone struggles with in the law is trying to communicate. And so one of the things that I try to do is over-communicate, communicate. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard. And sometimes I fail, but I get right back up again and I try to keep doing it. And I also think that that's rigorous, study. Is I really try to continue to study the law as much as possible. I'm a member of the Texas Bar College, which means that I take over the minimum required continuing education credits. And part of that is the law is constantly changing, and there's so much of it that I think you have to be a diligent student. And that's also why I teach at Baylor and A&M, is because by being a teacher, I'm forced to be a student. And so that I think that's professional and judicial, that's going to carry through. My personal core life, I will tell you that I've always had a motto of excel to serve and serve to excel, is that you have to serve other people before you're going to excel yourself. But what you find is in serving others, then your community becomes excellent, you become excellent, and the people you serve become excellent. And that you've really got to do with what you have. I've been fortunate and blessed to have a very high salary at one point. I've also been fortunate to be blessed to not have a whole lot. So I can eat a filet mignon and I can eat Spam, and I'm okay with both. I'm happy with who I am. I know who I am. I don't need other stuff. I get excited about working in the community. I get excited about my job. That's what makes me pumped up. And that's my core value, is that idea of you only get around once. And my intention is that when it's all over, I am used up, I am beat up, life has taken everything out of me, and I have given everything I possibly can. And that's always been my driving force.
What are some of your core spiritual beliefs?
I'm quiet about it, but I made a decision that if I'm going to be in public life, then people deserve it. I was raised Catholic. I still am Catholic. I've had some incredible religious experiences. I've been able to go to Israel and go to Jerusalem. I've been able to worship in a lot of different religious faiths, temples, and with a lot of different people I've been able to worship with. The Almighty and I, throughout this campaign, have had a few discussions at times, specifically when you have a tire blowout in the middle of nowhere. The Almighty and I had a lot of discussions about that. But, it's been interesting at times during the campaign that you just absolutely feel beaten down. It's always been interesting because something's always said, take the next step, take the next step. And generally when I took the next step, something awesome happened. And so it's you just got to have faith. And that's what I've always tried to do, is just have the faith and just continue to try to walk and live by it.
As a judge, how do you discern what is fair?
A lot of fairness comes down into process and procedure, because what you determine fair and what someone else determines fair, that can be very difficult. As the judge, what I have to make sure is you have your opportunity to present your case fairly and accurately, and that the jury is able, or I'm able, to see the evidence that you have to bring forward. And making sure that the other side has the ability to, and then being able to take all of that information and come in. And being able to kind of push through some of the tricks and silly nonsense and crazy objections. Lawyers, that's the one thing I love about trying cases as a judge. Lawyers will object to everything. Someone can sit there and say, the sky is green. Objection, Your Honor. And that's kind of a mental combat with it. But it really is wading through that and making sure that you have your opportunity to have your day in court. And that's what's fair. That's what encourages equality and justice.
How do you view people that step inside of your courtroom? Does their offense or history tell you everything that you need to know about them?
Well, first of all, when you step into my courtroom, I'm not going to know your offense and your history unless you've been before me, type thing. Because when you come before me, it's the state's responsibility on a criminal case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt of who they say you are, and then you have the opportunity to respond. When anyone steps in my courtroom, it is always, for like yourself, Mr. Strickland, and I'm going to treat you with dignity and that you deserve as a human being. And, you know, we'll talk about your sins in a second as the case goes forward, and we'll deal with the punishment of your sins in a second. But you have value as a human being. You deserve respect. And so you're always going to be given that respect. You and I, at the end of it, the state may prove their case, and they may prove that you are a bad person and that you deserve to be locked away, or you deserve to have probation, but that's going to be based on the evidence that's proven in court. It's not going to be based upon what I perceive you, because the only thing that I'm responsible for is you're the process to make sure it's fair. So I'm going to treat you as a human with worth dignity and worth respect, and then we will deal with what's proven in court, and then the sentence will be according to what's been proven in court. And here's the deal. Even after, like the gentleman I spoke about earlier that I worked with, when I sentenced him to 80 hours of community service, I sentenced myself to the community service because he had to work with me on it. And I still treated him with respect. And we worked through it, and because I treated him with respect, when he got done with his punishment, he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. That's the type of change that I want to see. And so I'm going to treat you with dignity and respect. We're going to deal with your punishment. And then even as you're leaving the courtroom, I'm still going to treat you with dignity and respect.
Being a municipal court judge, how is that going to differ being a district judge if you are chosen?
Well, what differs is punishment ranges, because all courts, and I think a lot of people get sidetracked and they think the municipal courts are speeding courts and traffic courts. And that's because most of us, that's the only contact we ever have with the judicial system. But all courts, district courts and municipal courts, all have to deal with drug offenses, crimes of violence, and crimes of theft and property crimes. The difference is the levels and range of punishment and the subject matter behind them. But the standard of reasonable doubt, the rules of how you have to conduct a jury trial, the rules of how you conduct a bench trial are essentially the same. And so there's not a whole lot of difference between those two. Is that what ends up happening is you still have a reasonable doubt checklist. Here's the 5 elements of the crime, whether that be capital murder or whether that be simple assault. There are certain elements that have to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. If they're not proved beyond a reasonable doubt, you must acquit. If they're proved, then it's guilty. And so that's what I'm saying is that state training is mandated for all of us judges. And there's a reason why it's uniformed in terms of that, is because it's just a matter of punishment ranges, lengths of trial changes, and the amount of evidence changes. But the procedures that the judge has to ensure are in effect don't change. And so yes, there's going to be a change. Of course there's going to be a change. But it is something that I can still build upon that experience, and I still have that judicial training, that judicial experience, that on day one, I know the process of a capital murder trial the same way that I know a process of a state jail felony, the same way I know the process of a misdemeanor A, and the same way I know the process of a simple assault. Those processes are identical.
For those people who are on the fence,
sure,
they say, well, we don't know enough about this guy. He only has municipal court judge experience. He doesn't have any district court experience. What do you say to that? Well,
first, let's handle the district court, because there's a number out there that I have no idea where it came from, because the number of cases in Falls County is, I think, triple of that. But I don't practice in Falls County because I signed the arrest warrants. I am not going to put you in jail and then make money off of you. That's a conflict of interest that I won't do. So my district court experience is in Milam County, Bell County, McLennan County, Collin County, Dallas County, Tarrant County, Erath County, Bosque County. I think I got them all. So if that gives you any idea, just right there, the number of counties I've practiced district courts in, I have district court experience. And that's not even talking about my federal district court experience. So I don't know where that came from. That's the reality, okay? The other part, the second part is, if people are on the fence, come see me. Call my office. In the past couple days, I've been going to people's homes. I've been talking to people on the phone. I have no problem, even if it's, dear Lord, someone asked me to come out at 6 a.m. in the morning. I will come out at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you can meet me. The other stuff is, I've also got everything on Facebook. My whole life's on Facebook, and my whole life is on the web, and so I encourage people just to go out and look at it. My biggest thing is that I really wish people would understand that local politics, we all get wrapped up in national politics, and it's easy to do that. But your local politics, your county positions, your district positions are so important, because at the end of the day, these are the people that affect your day in and day out life. Your city council affects you day in, day out. Your county commissioners affects you day in and day out. Your county judge affects you day in and day out. Your district attorney affects you day in, day out. And your district judge affects you day in and day out. People need to get as excited about those positions and vote and participate as they do at the national level. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote and get to know all the candidates.